The Reinvention of Edison Thomas, Chapter 8, Part 1. Dead, or at least mortally wounded, end. When his wake-upper kicked in, Eddie woke up feeling relaxed and rested. He had had his first full night of sleep in weeks. Not a single nightmare. He had been dreaming about solutions to the traffic problem instead of its disastrous consequences. Eddie left early, hoping to install his prototype traffic monitor before school. His design would work in theory, but he needed to test it in the real world in case he had overlooked any variables. What works in the basement may not work on 2 tons of steel. He measured 10 meters from the stop sign and set up the infrared light and detector he had scavenged from the garage door opener safety device. On the other side of the street, he set up a reflector and carefully aligned it so that it would reflect the infrared beam back at the detector. Cars that broke the beam of infrared light would be counted as cars approaching the intersection. A wire connected the infrared detector to the motion detector and master control unit, which he placed next to the stop sign. Once a car broke the infrared beam, the motion detector would determine if cars approaching the intersection came to a full stop at the stop sign. He wanted to test his monitor both in the morning and in the afternoon, since his data indicated that more cars failed to come to a complete stop in the morning than in the afternoon. He also didn't want to be late for school, so he checked his watch every minute. He had set his watch alarm to go off 10 minutes before school began, but he kept checking just in case. He supposed he would be able to tell that school was about to start because of the number of students approaching the school, but he didn't trust himself to notice if he was engrossed in his invention. To fine-tune his monitor, he had to wait for cars to come through the intersection. He had replaced the capacitor in the motion-activated light fixture with a smaller one. If he had left the original larger capacitor in, cars would have to hold still for 10 seconds to keep from triggering the motion detector. That was not likely to happen. With the new capacitor, he had gotten the time down to 1 second. Eddie watched and recorded cars in the intersection for a while. After about 20 minutes, he made some calculations and compared the results with his graph of data from the previous weeks. He was surprised to find that the percentage of cars that ran the stop sign was much lower that morning than on any of the other mornings he had observed. What were the chances of that? Maybe the blinders on the motion detector needed to be adjusted. The blinders allowed the motion detector to detect the motion of cars in the intersection without detecting other motions in the immediate area, like the large man who walked with a Irish wolfhound. Eddie adjusted the blinders a little and watched some more. Every time a car came through the intersection, he checked the counters on the monitor. He had gotten the counters from old commercial washing machines. One counter, connected to the infrared garage door safety device, counted cars entering the intersection. The second counter counted cars that failed to stop for at least 1 second. The counters seemed to be recording the events correctly. So why were things different today? "Hey, E.T.!" A forceful slap on the back almost knocked Eddie over. Eddie looked up to see Mitch and his buddy Mark. "Oh, hi," replied Eddie. "Do you want to see what I—" But Mitch and Mark were already waddling away like penguins. Eddie was still confused about the difference between his old data and his new data, so he continued to fiddle with the monitor, even after the alarm on his watch beeped. Within the time he had been observing that morning, significantly fewer cars blew through the stop sign than he had recorded on his bar graph from previous observations. Was the invention working already? But how? It was only recording events. Eddie hadn't even begun to work on the problem of how to signal that a car had ignored the stop sign. Suddenly, Eddie heard a roar and coughed, inhaling diesel exhaust as a school bus accelerated out of the intersection. School was about to start. Eddie hastily reset the counters and closed the access panel on the monitor, screwing it into place with a 1/4-inch nut driver, which he then shoved into his backpack. Eddie rushed into school and bolted up the steps to his locker. He pulled the sticky note that said "Weirdo" off his locker door and tried unsuccessfully to sneak quietly into homeroom. The discrepancy between the way cars, or more accurately their drivers, seemed to act when the monitor was in place and how they had acted in the past dominated Eddie's thoughts throughout the school day. Eddie went out to his monitor when lunch period started to see what had been recording during the morning. The data got more confusing. The numbers on the counters were pretty much the same as the numbers on his graph. The numbers he had recorded before this morning, not like the strange numbers he had gotten before school. He decided to watch the intersection for the entire lunch period. Over lunch, the numbers of cars running the stop sign were very low again, as they had been in the morning. He continued to think about the problem for the rest of the afternoon. The first thing Eddie did when he left school that afternoon was to eat his peanut butter and bee vomit sandwich. His stomach had been growling all afternoon because he had neglected to bring his lunch out with him when he observed his monitor during lunch period. He hadn't had time to eat anything during the rest of the day. When he reached the corner, he noticed that the top of the monitor was wet. This puzzled Eddie because it hadn't rained. He touched the puddle on the monitor and smelled his finger. Urine. Disgusted, Eddie wiped his hands vigorously on the grass, then on his pants. Apparently, a dog had mistaken his monitor for a fire hydrant. More likely, the dog had noticed a new object in its territory and marked it as its own. He unzipped his backpack to get his quarter-inch nut driver and opened the access panel. The inside of the monitor was dry. Eddie was relieved that it was protected from the pee and confident that it would be safe from rain as well. Eddie began checking the settings in his monitor. He looked up briefly and noticed someone loitering across the street. Was he being watched? He shrugged and got a piece of paper and a pencil from his backpack. Whoops! Mitch's voice startled Eddie, and when he looked up, he saw his quarter-inch nut driver skittering down the sidewalk and rolling off the curb. Then he noticed Mitch and Will standing over him. Hey, E.T., you should be careful where you leave your screwdrivers, said Will. Actually, it is a quarter-inch nut driver, said Eddie as he scrambled to his feet and stumbled over to pick it up before it went down the storm sewer. Will and Mitch howled with laughter. Eddie didn't say anything as he put the nut driver into his backpack. He shouldn't have left it in the middle of the sidewalk. He could have tripped someone. The laughter diminished as Mitch and Will walked away. Suddenly, Mitch stopped. Hey, Eddie. What? Phone home. Will and Mitch laughed even harder. Eddie wondered what he meant by that. Did Mitch know something Eddie didn't? Eddie didn't have a cell phone with him, so he filed Mitch's comment in the back of his brain and continued working on the monitor. As the loiterer crossed the street, Eddie recognized Kip Cleghorn from social studies class. Kip was the only boy he knew who wore his hair in a ponytail. As he walked toward Eddie, his big toes popped in and out of holes in his black high-top sneakers. Hi, Eddie, said Kip. Hi, said Eddie. He wondered if Kip was going to want to have a conversation. Tiffany had said that a good way to start a conversation is by talking about something you have in common with the other person, or something that interests you both. Eddie looked at Kip's t-shirt. It had some writing on it. AC/DC. Are you interested in electricity? Eddie asked. Only when it powers my guitar. Can your guitar run on both alternating and direct current? What does that mean? Do you plug it into an outlet on the wall, or can you run it off a battery pack or plug it into the cigarette lighter in a car? I plug it into the wall, but it would be great to use a battery pack. Then I could play anywhere, even in the middle of a field or on the beach. My mom sometimes complains when I practice at home. Then your t-shirt should just say AC because you do not at this time have the capacity to run your guitar on direct current. What? AC/DC would mean you can use both sources of power, said Eddie, pointing at Kip's shirt. Oh, I get it. That's a good one, laughed Kip. AC/DC is the name of a heavy metal band. Eddie listed the heavy metals in his head. Some, such as cobalt, copper, iron, manganese, molybdenum, vanadium, strontium, and zinc, are needed by the body in trace amounts, but excessive levels can be detrimental. Other heavy metals, such as mercury, lead, and cadmium, have no beneficial effects and are toxic. A rock band, continued Kip. Sedimentary, igneous, metamorphic. You know, music. I like They Might Be Giants, said Eddie. I like that they use science in their lyrics and that the science is accurate. I hate it when people get the science wrong. I like They Might Be Giants too. What's your favorite song? It is called Mammal. It is the only song in the world, to my knowledge, with the word monotreme in its lyrics. What's monotreme? Monotremes are mammals that lay eggs. Mammals don't lay eggs. Monotremes do. The duck-billed platypus and the spiny anteater, also known as are monotremes. They're unique, which is what I like about them. Eddie resisted the urge to recite the Latin names of the duck-billed platypus and the family. Tiffany said some people think it is strange to use Latin names for everything. I like Birdhousing Your Soul and Istanbul from Flood. I like that CD too. I'll bet you also like White as the Sunshine, otherwise known as The Sun is a Mass of Incandescent Gas. That is a lot of science too. It is a catchy song, but the science is no longer accurate, since that song was written in the 1950s. Scientists have established that the sun is made of plasma, not gas. Then they might be giants. Didn't write it? No, but they made a new song to reflect new scientific findings. It is on the Here Comes Science CD released in 2009. The new song is called Why Does the Sun Really Shine? Or The Sun is a Miasma of Incandescent Plasma. I prefer the newer, more accurate version. Why am I not surprised? Kip laughed. I do not know, said Eddie. Kip seemed to be asking him to read his mind, just as Dad did. You know, I've been trying to get my band to play some They Might Be Giant songs, but they say they're too geeky. I prefer the term quirky. Well, they're too quirky for my band. I think you should play them. What is your band called? Western Blot. Eddie gave a hearty laugh. Why did you name your band after a protein analysis technique? A what? Western blot is a way to analyze proteins in the laboratory. First, you separate the proteins by molecular weight using an electric current, and then you transfer the proteins onto a membrane and use antibiotics to... Obviously, we had no idea what it meant. I think Trevor just picked it out of a newspaper. The other guys want to change it because they say it makes us sound like we play country music, which we don't like. I like it, though. It sounds angry and political. Oh, no. I forgot, said Eddie suddenly. Do you have a cell phone? No, why? For some reason, Mitch says I need to phone home. You think he's serious? Asked Kip. Yes, said Eddie. Why not? He's just trying to get your goat. Eddie laughed. I do not have a goat. But I do have a rabbit. Her name is Oristo. OC. Maybe people wouldn't think it was strange to use the initials of the Latin name. Yeah, well, I think Mitch is calling you an alien, an extraterrestrial, E.T., phone home. Eddie remembered now E.T. The Extraterrestrial was a movie released in 1982 and directed by Steven Spielberg.